the growth in emerging market philanthropy could not be occurring at a more critical time. Government budgets are coming under ever increasing pressure from the pandemic and the global downturn. In this conversation with Badr Jafar, the founding patron of the Center for Strategic Philanthropy and the CEO of Crescent Enterprises, he tells us the role philanthropy has in bridging the annual funding gap.
I think it's worth stating at the outset that the issue isn't one of a lack of capital per se. The world has quadrillions of dollars or dollar equivalents at its disposal. The issue is a failure to channel that capital towards where it's most needed to solve our world's greatest challenges, or in other words, to achieve the SDGs. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the UN warned that to have a realistic chance of achieving SDGs, an additional $2.5 trillion would be required every single year up to 2030. And the events of this year have only exacerbated this shortfall, with one UN agency recently calling for a $2 trillion crisis package to cushion the impact of COVID-19 on developing countries. So that's another $2 trillion right there, just to take us back to where we were 9 months ago. And we also know from the World Bank that the pandemic could push up to 100 million people into extreme poverty this year alone. At the same time, of course, government budgets around the world have been pushed to the limit. So convincing countries to allocate more money to overseas development assistance is a tough sell. There are, of course, a number of major systemic obstacles that have been getting in the way of the world's ability to implement the SDGs, and many of these predated COVID-19. So the truth is that there's a lot that has to go right for us to have a realistic shot at achieving the SDGs by 2030. But as I said at the start, the capital is there. We just need to be more disciplined and creative about how to channel that capital to where it is needed the most.
Yes, now, Jafar, to just piggyback on what you've just said, the capital is there. How do we channel? What are the right tools? How do we find the right financing to bridge this gap?
Well, as is often the case, there are a number of things that need to happen all together. Governments need to think strategically about the alignment of efforts with other sectors and to be prepared to partner with other countries to achieving mutual resilience. If there's one thing that COVID-19 has demonstrated, it's that no country can wall itself off from the effects of a global crisis, no matter how wealthy it is. Businesses obviously need to step up too, and fast. It's been estimated that implementing the SDGs will open up $12 trillion in new market opportunities for businesses around the world and create up to 400 million new jobs. So even if your business is motivated only by profits, and hopefully it isn't, but even if it is, then getting behind the SDGs is still in our own long-term interest as business leaders. Now, something that isn't often discussed is the huge role to be played by private philanthropy. Far too long, philanthropic capital has been treated as the forgotten child of the global capital system. The reality is that well over $1 trillion of private philanthropic capital, more than triple the annual global development and aid and humanitarian aid budgets combined, is deployed every year. And these are huge sums that dwarf the foreign aid budgets of even the most generous of countries. So we have to try and find some new ways to channel more of these funds towards projects and initiatives that are aligned with the SDGs. And this is, in essence, why the Center for Strategic Philanthropy at the University of Cambridge Judge Business School was launched with exclusive focus on the emerging markets. So from my perspective, the most important opportunity is not to think about any of these funding sources in isolation, because governments, businesses, and private foundations must create more collaborative working models to jointly develop and jointly fund efforts to address the world's greatest challenges.
Yeah, you've just touched on emerging markets, and it has also been said a different number of times that this is actually the right time for emerging when you look at the emerging market philanthropy, it could not occur at a better time than today. Why would you think that people would assume that this is actually the right time for these to come in place and take up the role?
I mean, there's a seismic shift underway in the global economy, right? Top 30 fastest growing economies in the world last year are all in emerging markets, including a disproportionate number from Africa. And it's expected that trillions of dollars will be passed on from one generation to the next within these economies over the next 10 years. And this means that we can expect to see a significant increase in philanthropic activity, both within and from the world's emerging markets in the years ahead. And to be clear, it doesn't just mean charitable giving, which of course is very extensive in many of these countries already. What I'm talking about is strategic, evidence-based institutional philanthropy. And this is a super welcome development for a number of reasons. Part of it is that we need the extra capital. We've already talked about that. But what I'm most excited about is the potential for emerging market philanthropists to bring new ways of thinking to the table and to develop new models of philanthropy that are shaped by their own societies and cultures. You know, this could be a breath of fresh air for the global philanthropic sector and potentially spur all kinds of new innovations. So emerging market philanthropists will really be uniquely equipped to come up with workable solutions to the specific challenges being faced by their own communities. You know, often the best solution to a problem comes from people that are most affected by it and closest to it. So from my perspective, the rise of strategic philanthropy from within the world's emerging markets will have some major direct as well as indirect important effects on the social and economic landscapes of this region.
It has just been launched, and how will it be strategic? You've touched on this a couple of times.
Yes, so I was very fortunate to partner with the University of Cambridge on the establishment of, as I mentioned, this new Center for Strategic Philanthropy within the university's Judge Business School, which hit the ground running earlier this year. What's unique about the center is its focus, again, on exclusive focus on philanthropy, both within and from the world's emerging markets, including those in Africa, developing Asia, and the Middle East. There are three pillars, if you will, of the center's work that are, of course, interconnected. First, undertaking rigorous research related to strategic philanthropy within and from the world's fastest growing economies. Second, providing education and training to the next generation of philanthropic leaders to emerge from these countries. And finally, convening diverse voices from around the world to advance our understanding of strategic philanthropy and to enhance its impact and effectiveness in these fastest growing regions of the world.